Welcome to Museum Archipelago. I'm Ian Elsner. Museum Archipelago guides you through the rocky landscape of museums. Each episode is never longer than 15 minutes. So let's get started. Six Flags New Orleans' last operating day was August 27th, 2005. 2 days later, Hurricane Katrina made landfall, and the entire park was submerged under feet of corrosive water.
That park was decimated. There was no returning that park to any sort of viability.
Carole Sanderson is secretary and board member of the National Roller Coaster Museum and Archives.
We were very fortunate to be able to go in and get some of the archives and some of the signage and some of the neon, which we have in our museum with Six Flags permission. We were trying to get some ride vehicles and stuff, but a lot of it had already been scrapped because of the mold and the mud and all the other things. So, there's nothing to bring back there.
The National Roller Coaster Museum and Archives makes it its mission to protect and preserve historic amusement park memorabilia. Parks that have closed in the past are the subjects of the strong emotions of people who remember them.
We did an exhibit sort of as a test run and in collaboration with Dollywood, and that exhibit ran for 2 years. And I was able to be in that exhibit when the public would come through. And we had featured the parks of Tennessee because Dollywood is in Tennessee, and all the parks that we were featuring in this one little area of the exhibit are no longer. And people, it was amazing to me, that would come by, would say, "Oh my gosh, do you remember when Grandma and Grandpa and we went to that park and we rode this ride and what a great day it was? And boy, it's too bad it had to close." It's like everything. Once it's done, then people are upset that it's gone.
An amusement park is made up of fake history and fake danger. When you walk along Main Street, USA, in Disneyland or Disney World, you are greeted by fake history. The facades show early 20th century small-town America, an idealized version of fake history. When you get on a roller coaster, you are not in real danger, but the coaster designers do everything they can to fake the danger. So with all this fakeness, what is there to preserve in a museum?
The museum concept was one of the original goals of Richard Munch, who was the founder of the American Coaster Enthusiasts back in the 70s. As he and two of the other founders were traveling around the country, parks were just being decimated and they were going away. Many, many parks that were historic from the early 1900s, 1920s, 1950s, the parks were experiencing, they couldn't get enough capital to invest in the parks. It was a very tough time in American history for the amusement park in the late 60s, so a lot of parks were closing. A lot of parks were selling their real estate for future development, and he really believed that we needed to preserve, if we couldn't preserve the parks, we definitely needed to preserve the memories, the artifacts, the rides, and anything we could get our hands on.
I love a good coaster, but to me, the exciting part is the thrill of the first drop, or the airtime, not necessarily a piece of the coaster presented as an artifact. But Carole makes the case that even a stationary roller coaster train can be exciting.
It's really interesting if you have a roller coaster car or a roller coaster track. People can so identify with something that, oh my gosh, I rode that when I was 7. Oh my gosh, you have the original Coney Island something or other, or you have the original Big Bad Wolf ride from Busch Gardens. Like, oh my gosh. Right. So there is a sense of excitement to be able to see it, touch it, feel it, as opposed to something that's just, telling the story.
Carole describes combining the artifact with the story to create the biggest impact.
In the museum, we have cars from the 1910s and the 1920s, and so that's also important because people can see how the technology evolved with undercarriage wheels, with safety restraints or lack of them, how the cars were made out of wood and now they're made out of fiberglass. One of the best acquisitions, and it was a critical acquisition in our minds, was we received the #1 car off the Disneyland Matterhorn ride. Amazing that we were able to get the full vehicles to the front car and the trailer car, the track, the signage, to preserve because that was a monumental ride.
Right now, the National Roller Coaster Museum and Archives is more of an archive than a museum. They have a physical storage facility located in Plainview, Texas, and they have a series of exhibits, like the one previously mentioned at Dollywood.
The first goal was we have to have a place where we can preserve everything. If you don't have any contents, you can't have a museum. Secondly, we want to get the message out and to have our name out there, which it is in the industry. So when a park is like either closing or if they're retiring a ride, they call us to say, this was a very special ride. Will you guys take it and preserve it?
The dream of opening a standalone museum, maybe even one with working coasters, is still alive.
Having a building there where maybe you could have a small park where you had the roller coaster, and then you could, have some other rides there. You could have, other venues there as far as, special occasion kind of place where people would come. That would be ideal. However, again, from an economic standpoint, we initially had never wanted to be inside of a park because you don't want somebody that wants to come to the museum to have to pay a gate admission just to see your museum. You could design it where you had a separate entrance just for the museum. If the park had the museum in the park, again, the staffing, the insurance, the taxes, all that stuff goes away, and we just become a tenant, a nonprofit tenant in their their mix. We have talked to a number of parks. There is interest. It just never seems to come to fruition because, the real estate in the park is important and they want to put rides in and they want to have people riding. We've got to keep working on it. We're not there yet. But yes, would it be great to be right next to a park where there's population already going? Absolutely. We don't want to be somewhere in the middle of nothing because you're right. People would come and that's it. They see it and then they move on. The other thing is, in a hot location, older people like to get out of the heat. So if it's an air-conditioned building, that's why people go into the shows, they go into these venues. You get a lot more traffic because people want to beat the heat. And then they'll walk through an exhibit and take their time and cool down and rest a little bit and not be on overload with, let's run to the next attraction. It's kind of like an old car meet sometimes, People want to talk about it, and people want to keep that alive. So I think that the amusement industry is so exciting. There's so many new things, and I think people are always looking for an escape. That's why Disney, gets the brand is huge because everybody wants to, you would think that It's a Small World, nobody would want to hear that song again, but everyone wants to hear that song,
Right.
Everybody rides that ride. And if they were taken out, there'd be an outcry. So, I think that there's always room for that, to fall into that fantasy world.
This has been Museum Archipelago. You'll find show notes at museumarchipelago.com. Club Archipelago members get access to a bonus podcast feed that's sort of like the director's commentary to the main show. Subscribe at patreon.com/museumarchipelago. If this is your first show, don't forget to subscribe for free in your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening. And next time, bring a friend.